Hello and welcome to a Sunday morning meetup, and welcome to the start of a new series in which I explore literary genres A to Z. This episode is A for absurdist literature. While reading is generally encouraged, there are some genres that people often see as something to be ashamed of reading. That is to say, books they don't want to admit they enjoy. There are two main reasons for this, partly because they are seen as being low quality, but also because they are seen as neither academic nor prestigious enough to be displayed proudly on your living room bookshelf. However, I do think there is a case for these shameful pleasures, and would argue that we shouldn't feel so ashamed of them after all. Firstly, I think low quality needs to be defined. Some people may say that this includes books with common tropes, often used plots, or predictable endings. While this is admittedly frequent in certain genres, it is not always the case, and there are many which are more original. Even though these genres can be accused of being cliché, other genres have their own frequently used tropes. For example, mystery novels will have red herrings and almost always end with the reveal of the culprit. This is simply the framework and necessary ingredients of the genre. A book based on a commonly used storyline does not automatically mean that it is of low quality. Although the popularity of something doesn't always prove its quality, I think the popularity of the romance genre and mystery fiction does suggest that we should appreciate these works and that the achievement of these authors should be admired. For me, it is more appropriate to judge a book as badly written if characters are unrealistic or underdeveloped, if there are plot holes, or if there are overused descriptions. Therefore, even though romance novels often use similar storylines, we shouldn't criticise them for it as long as they have been written well. The other reason why we feel ashamed of reading certain genres could be because we feel expected to read something more challenging, thought-provoking, or academic. Whilst it is undeniable that the classics have value, I believe that romance, chick lit, and other shamed genres have their own value and can be equally thought-provoking. Chick lit and romance is generally more light-hearted, which makes it relaxing to read. Although some argue that chick lit is anti-feminist, perhaps for their exaggerated and stereotypical presentation of women, it still frequently places women in the centre of the narrative, which is a contrast to the majority of the classics. To free ourselves from this shame, we should be judging the quality of books individually and realising that we don't always need to read what others have established as acceptable. Although our classification of the canon is gradually changing, they were predominantly written by and for a very narrow demographic. We might see classics as valuable, but we should also see their flaws and not dismiss the value of different genres. We should realise that the canon is not perfect. Even when a book is badly written, it isn't necessary to feel ashamed for enjoying it, as a large part of reading is about enjoyment. Often we see books as a way of furthering ourselves, and that can be true, and can also be achieved through the genres we label as shameful pleasures. But reading can also be beneficial in terms of enabling us as an opportunity to retreat from our everyday stress and providing simple enjoyment in whichever genre you find it. At the end of the day, everyone is going to have their own taste when it comes to reading, so there is no reason to feel ashamed. But are you bored by the pretentious literary establishment? Is literary fiction pretentious, self-absorbed, and snobbish? I wouldn't be so pretentious, self-absorbed, and snobbish to say so. But isn't it time to read books that you really enjoy and want to read? Thrillers, spy novels, romance, historical fiction, mysteries, adventure, humour, crime, fantasy, sci-fi, family sagas, and stories with plots and fascinating characters? Or do you want to plough through the turgid and pretentious prose that is modern literary fiction in the hope of finding something that may actually be interesting and worth your while to read, when you know that for the most part the prose is going to disgust and turn you off, and you'll end up DNFing 50% of more of what you begin? When realistically it would be much more advantageous to acknowledge that what you actually enjoy is what the snobs call lowbrow literature, that is actually enjoyable and much more to your real taste. Right, now that I have alienated 50% of my viewers, we can begin to explore the fascinating world of literary genres, because make no mistake about it, genres are literary and the most interesting and absorbing literature that you can read. So today I'll discuss books to read that are absurdist. Other terms for this are surreal or whimsical. Absurdist and surreal fiction challenges casual and rudimentary reasoning and even the most basic purposefulness found within life. L'Étranger is a 1942 novel by French author Albert Camus. In English it is called The Stranger or The Outsider. Its theme and outlook are often cited as examples of Camus' philosophy of the absurd. The Stranger, aka The Outsider, is the story of an ordinary man unwittingly drawn into a senseless murder on an Algerian beach. Camus explored what he termed the nakedness of man faced with the absurd. The title character is Meursault, an indifferent French Algerian described as a citizen of France domiciled in North Africa, a man of the Mediterranean, yet one who hardly partakes of the traditional Mediterranean culture. He attends his mother's funeral. A few days later he kills an Arab man in French Algiers who was involved in a conflict with a friend. Meursault is tried and sentenced to death. The story is divided into two parts, presenting Meursault's first-person narrative view before and after the murder, respectively. In January 1955, Camus wrote, "I summarized The Stranger a long time ago with a remark I admit was highly paradoxical. In our society, any man who does not weep at his mother's funeral runs the risk of being sentenced to death. I only meant that the hero of my book is condemned because he does not play the game." Absurdist literature is often, though not always, connected to comedy. Whimsical has to do with a sense of eccentric or quirky humour. It exaggerates real life in a whimsical, eccentric, quirky or fanciful way, sometimes including magical extensions of reality. Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll is a perfect example of this. When Alice follows the white rabbit down the rabbit hole, little does she know that she is travelling to a world of magic where common sense is turned upside down. The dream world of nonsensical Wonderland is full of the unexpected. A baby turns into a pig, time is missing at a tea party, and a wild chess game makes the 7-year-old Alice a queen. The absurdist genre focuses on the experiences of characters in situations where they cannot find any inherent purpose in life, most often represented by ultimately meaningless actions and events that call into question the certainty of existential concepts such as truth or value. The Trial by Franz Kafka is a terrifying psychological trip into the life of one Joseph K., an ordinary man who wakes up one day to find himself accused of a crime he did not commit, a crime whose nature is never revealed to him. From then on, his life becomes increasingly unpredictable. Once arrested, he is released but must report to court on a regular basis, an event that proves maddening as nothing is ever resolved. As he grows more uncertain of his fate, his personal life, including work at a bank and his relations with his landlady and a young woman who lives next door, becomes increasingly unpredictable. As Kay tries to gain control, he succeeds only in accelerating his own excruciatingly downward spiral. The closely related overlapping surreal genre is predicated on deliberate violations of causal reasoning, producing events and behaviours that are obviously illogical. The Metamorphosis, also by Franz Kafka, is the story of travelling salesman Gregor Samsa, who wakes one morning to find himself transformed into a large, monstrous, insect-like creature. The cause of Gregor's transformation is never revealed, and as he attempts to adjust to his new condition, he becomes a burden to his parents and sister, who are repelled by the horrible, verminous creature Gregor has become. As Gregor Samson awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. He was laying on his hard, as it were, armour-plated back, and when he lifted his head a little, he could see his dome-like brown belly divided into stiff arched segments, on top of which the bed quilt could hardly keep in position, and was about to slide off completely. His numerous legs, which were pitifully thin compared to the rest of his bulk, waved helplessly before his eyes. With this startling, bizarre, yet surprisingly funny first opening, Kafka begins his masterpiece. The Metamorphosis is the story of a young man who, transformed overnight into a giant beetle-like insect, becomes an object of disgrace to his family, an outsider in his own home, a quintessentially alienated man. A harrowing, though absurdly comic, meditation on human feelings of inadequacy, guilt and isolation. The Metamorphosis has taken its place as one of the most widely read and influential works of 20th century fiction. As W.H. Auden wrote, Kafka is important to us because his predicament is the predicament of modern man. Let me know in the comments below if you have any favourites in this genre, and I'll be back soon with another BookTube video.